Okay. Hi, my name is Charlotte Smith, and my topic is about commercial whaling, which is basically poaching whales and selling their meat on the fish market. So, industrial whaling was extremely popular in the 17th century when they hunted for blubber and whale meat and their oil. However, whaling decreased in popularity in 1986 when commercialized whaling was banned in most countries, except Japan, Norway, and Iceland. They use an excuse that their whaling is scientific research. Now, I find it that the whaling industry is greatly harming the Japanese economy. First, because the whaling industry is dying. Government's efforts to keep the whaling industry running is counterproductive, and there's much greater economic wealth in whale tourism, so whale watching. My first point is that the whale industry is dying. Since 1988, when the ban was put in place, the economic value of whale meat has greatly declined. In these past 20 years, the whaling industry has lost $223 million. So it's just the price of whale has gone down, so it's not really kind of a delicacy anymore. In 2008, the government planned there to be $64 million of a profit, but it turned out to be 45. So the Japanese government has a tendency of overestimating the amount of profit that they are going to get from the whale meat. Now in 2010, the last studies that showed, there's $22 million in profit. So lowered great amount, about $20 more million. The whale meat that is processed, only 25% of it is actually sold on the market. So whale meat that doesn't sell is thrown away or given to other places. And whale meat is probably most unpopular because it has a really tough texture and barely any taste unless you put a lot of salt on it, but it's basically like you're just eating fat. But the pork and other seafood is much more popular in Japan because, well, that's what most of their known meals have in them. My second point is that the government's efforts to keep the whaling industry going is kind of counterproductive because they have been using a lot of subsidies to allow the whaling industry to keep going. So by the end of 2014, the fiscal year, the government used subsidies of $50 million. That is a stat from Matt Lundgren, GEI Associates. And they took the $50 million out of taxpayers to pay for an industry that most of Japan has they don't favor the whaling. They also took $25 million of subsidies from the Tsunami and Earthquake Foundation in 2012, just a year after the massive tsunami happened in Japan, which caused thousands of deaths. So they took a lot of funding from that just to keep the whaling industry going. The 75% extra whale meat that I talked about that wasn't really used, they sell it to schools, and school children get the choice of whale meat in their lunches. Unfortunately, whale meat has a high level of mercury, so compared to a lot of other seafoods which also have mercury in it, whale meat exceeds it with PCBs and DDT, and the causes of those chemicals in the whale meat can cause damage to fetal neural development, high blood pressure, impaired immunity, especially in children, which is bad because they're feeding it to children, and possible infertility in adults. So there's a lot of problems that come with just eating whale meat. My third point is that, watching whales is better than eating it. So the whaling industry should so whale watching is much more profitable than commercialized whaling. So an increase in tourism has started ever since the 2000s, where about $13 million profit in the early 2000s, but since 2010, $2.4 billion in profits, employing around 13,000 people across the coastal regions. So it just blew up how popular it is now. If you decrease the commercialized whaling, it will allow people to come and tour instead of using the whaling boats as catching the whales. You can take them out and let them see the whales. Professor Waring of the University of Technology said that whale watching total economic value in Japan contributed about $16.4 million in just 1 year, and they still have whaling going on, so if they just shut that down, there would be a much more profit, immense more profit. So basically, that is why the economy of Japan is not doing too well. Whale industry is dying. Nobody wants whale meat. Government efforts to keep it running are really just causing harm to the people, feeding it to children, and taking subsidies out of much needed organizations, tsunamis, earthquakes, very common in Japan. And there's much greater economic wealth in whale tourism, so let's watch the whales instead of eat them. Thank you.